Are you okay to start?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, good.
number 26.
Oh,
It's our command.
yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hello. I'm Kate Taylor. I'm at the Social Planning Council of Winnipeg. We're one of the main partners on the this year's the 2022 Street Census, along with Homelessness Winnipeg and Siloam Mission and many others some of whom are here. But you'll be able to see them all in the report. I'm going to do a few quick opening remarks. We'll turn it over to Elder Charlotte for a prayer and to get us off in a good way. And then you'll be hearing from my colleague Josh Brandon, who is who's the main report author this year. So I do want a couple of housekeeping things. You might have heard it. We are recording this. It is going live right now, actually, as well. So we knew we couldn't. COVID is still very present with us. We knew we couldn't pack people into a room. So that's why we decided to do part of it on Zoom as well. So that's happening, but it's also being recorded. So in case we can use it later, we will do that. So the main thing to start with in my opening remarks is what is a street census and what it is not. So it's a confusing term for some people because it's often referred to as a point in time count, which seems to imply that we're trying to count the number of people who are experiencing homelessness, which of course is practically impossible. There are just any number of reasons for that. Main one is that people, it's still incredible stigmatizing to admit that you don't have shelter. So the street census, the reason why we do it this way is because it's an attempt to contextualize people who are experiencing homelessness, their experiences, because if we can understand their pathways into it and the barriers that they are facing and trying to get out of it, we have a much better chance of actually finally ending homelessness. So, and that would be our goal. But in order to do that, we actually have to end poverty. So, as I said, you can look at the report. Josh will go into it in more detail in a little bit. But one of the numbers that struck me looking at it is the number of people who are actually on our social assistance who are still unsheltered. So that's supposed to be our social safety net. That's what's supposed to be keeping people from abject poverty. Clearly, it's not working. Clearly, the rates are not enough. It doesn't even bring people to 50% of the poverty line. That's what we're at 45% of our poverty line on social assistance. So very quickly, we're an organization, we turned 100 in 2019. So looking back over our history, looking through old documents, I actually found some legislation from the turn of into the 1900s. And they were talking about what to do about poverty then. And right there in the legislation, it was written with the idea that, well, of course we have to help people, but we can't make them too comfortable or else they won't get out of poverty. So we've been doing that for how long now? And it's clearly not working. It's still our ethos. We still give people barely subsistence living. So that's my takeaway from the report, but I will leave it at that because the report has interesting information. We also have recommendations. And hopefully with all of us, we will build and insist on the political will to end homelessness and end poverty. So with that, I will introduce Elder Charlotte, who will send us on our way in a good way.
Francie, bonjour. Anista, ne powys garskal kego esquire. Equa, ne consumas the tema infimite. Equa, Charlotte. Ki hune dodem, River Valley Dochan. Castawini yao, utipimiswak. Greetings, my relatives. Tawao, welcome, good evening. As we gather here on Treaty 1 territory, home of the Ojibwe, Nayao, the Oji Cree, and Dene, the Lakota people, and the homeland of the Red River Métis. We're here to hear the reports of the street census and try and figure ways to end homelessness. The reality is that each and every one of us is one step away from being homeless. a catastrophe could happen in your life, then you're homeless. So when we think of our relatives who are out there with no home, no warm place to sleep, and most of the time is very hungry, we have to remember that these are our relatives. In our Cree language, we have a word, wakotowin, which speaks of kinship. It speaks about how we are all related as human beings. And that's what I'd like to remind people of. We are all human beings. And in such, Creator wanted us to look after one another, to help one another. So if people would like to stand and remove your hats, please. Ano tayo na, sila ito. Kinaas kong tin, kinaas kong tin, kukunaw mo sunaw. Kinaas kong tin, kiganaw ski. Kinaas kong tin, iwi maganas, kwe pimitation, equa, pimimasqua, equa. As necos constas, equa, popis kiwis, kwea. Creator, grandmothers, grandfathers, I humbly stand before you today. And I ask you, Creator, grandmothers, grandfathers, help us in the work that we're trying to accomplish so that we can end homelessness, not just in Winnipeg, but across this country, across the nation, across the world. We ask you, Creator, grandmothers, grandfathers, to look after our relatives who are experiencing homelessness. Please provide them with a warm shelter this evening and warm food. Ali Créateur, merci pour cette journée. Merci pour notre parenté. Merci pour les petits-enfants, nos jeunes, nos adultes et nos aînés. Et je vous demande, Créateur, prenez soin de notre parenté pour qu'ils trouvent une place pour se coucher ce soir et un repas chaud. If I've forgotten anything, Creator, please accept them in my sound prayers. Itakwe say, Gagana Kumakana, Tut ma parente, Echo say, oh, thank you.
Jimmy Witch, Elder Charlotte, for providing a blessing and land acknowledgement for us to be here today. It's a very important part of the process. Prayer, spirituality is something that we'd like to bring back as a strength to strengthen our community and support our community. First of all, bonjour, Gabi Delan, Jishnika, my English name is Jason Whitford, and working as the Chief Executive Officer of Homelessness Winnipeg. I'm a member of Sandy Bay Ojibwe First Nation. I've been in this role for close to a year now. I think it actually is 1 year. First of all, I want to give a thank you to Josh and to the Social Planning Council for their excellent work on this project here, and acknowledge my colleague Elijah for his leadership on this file as well, and the numerous volunteers that participated and went out on the streets on the May 24th and 25th and interviewed the more than 1,600 individuals. But mostly I want to thank those individuals that shared their experiences with us, that produced comprised the content of this report. Their experiences with this exercise could not be what it is without their willingness to share that. And the whole purpose of the street census was to better understand the challenges that they themselves have encountered, in order that we the technicians, the community, that can communicate that to the decision makers out there, different levels of government, the business community, the general population, media, and our own other people in the community. We need to better understand the complexities of homelessness, the pathways into homelessness, in order to develop strategies. Develop strategies that would prevent people from facing that type of hardship. I think some of the recommendations have been repeated in previous censuses. This is the third comprehensive census that has been completed in partnership with the Social Planning Council. And some of those findings that are not surprising are that Indigenous people are grossly overrepresented in homelessness. Another one that is stated, the evidence of, is that child welfare. More than 50% have documented involvement in child welfare and have a first experience in homelessness at the age of 18. That can be prevented. In one of my previous roles as a manager of the Eagle Urban Transition Center for 7 years, we supported through that organization individuals that were relocating from First Nation communities, or even residing in urban centers for many years, but still not being able to, I guess, access the right supports that they needed. And oftentimes, the longer that they went without supports, the more complex and challenging their circumstances became. I considered myself a boardroom panhandler, trying to plead for support for the organization. However, I continue to seek proposal-based funding, but so we need organization-based funding to do this important work, so that we can spend less time writing proposals and more time doing the work, and that's where the impact needs to come from. So that in itself needs to, the funders of such resources need to change the way they observe resources. I was sharing with our host Tessa earlier that at that time I felt the need, and I tried to promote the goal to establish more resources such as Eagle Urban Transition Center within an urban center like Winnipeg, have one at every corner of the city, and places like Brandon, Thompson, Portage la Prairie, where we're seeing people struggle and access supports. When I was at the Eagle Urban Transition Center, we partnered with the University of Winnipeg and completed a mobility study. And that mobility study compared newcomers coming into Winnipeg or Canada, and Indigenous people leaving the rural environment and coming into urban centers. The newcomers have and this is nothing again derogatory against newcomers. There is a safety net of supports: housing, education, identification, learning to drive, childcare, a social net of supports. Whereas Indigenous people coming into urban centers from rural places, it's almost as if you step off of your First Nation community and your rights do not exist as a First Nations person. In this day and age of reconciliation, that needs to be rectified. The portability of treaty rights, which was one of the objectives of the Eagle Urban Transition Center. Some of the impacts of people leaving the reserve and coming to the city were culture shock. The noises, the sounds, discrimination, the language, the diet, the connected to the land, and newcomers coming to Canada as well. It was documented that the social, emotional impact was very similar, but the level of support just weren't there. But the biggest difference is that this is our land, this is our territory. And so that's what needs to be rectified. I'm very I've dedicated probably a good part of my life to working with our community, as I'm sure many of you do. Since I've taken on this role as full-time. There's so many sleepless nights, wake up in the middle of the night, first thing in the morning, and think about our relatives. I think about the cold weather coming, and what we can do as a community to help, what we can do to do more. I think what we really need to do is, many of the recommendations are the same. What we need to really do is to try to more lobbying. This belongs to the community. It doesn't belong to the one organization or one individual. It belongs to the community. We need to strategize. We need to put pressure. We need to get the resources to make these recommendations a reality. We don't want to come back here in 2 years and say the same thing. We want to come back here in 2 years and say, thank you for implementing these recommendations and making a difference and making our community a better place. Well, I want to thank all of you for being here, and thank all of the organizers, and most turn it over to Tessie.
Thank you all for being here for this, and welcome to Siloam Mission. I am the CEO here. I also am 1 year in, and want to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territory, and with gratitude, especially as a Christian organization, we recognize the sorrow that we feel about the impact that places of faith have had on Indigenous people and how they've contributed to some of those hardships. And we look forward to moving together into the future in the spirit and commitment to truth and reconciliation, so that we may build a better community. And we recognize with gratitude the stewardship by the Dakota, Ojibwe, Oji-Cree, and Dene peoples and Inuits in the far north to this territory that allows us to be here to live, work, and play, seek electricity from Treaty 5 and beyond, and the water that gives us life is from Treaty 3. And so we start today acknowledging that we have a history that leads to the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in this street census. And we have a commitment as treaty people and as Canadians to take responsibility and act responsibly to make a better tomorrow with our hosts and gracious neighbors. One of the things that sticks out to me in this strategy is the methodology. I am a sociologist by training and taught at the University of Winnipeg for a long time. And we know that of the roughly 1,250 people captured, that means that there's 3,000 people that we didn't hear their story, and we don't understand why they came into experiencing homelessness. We also know from those that we did talk to that there are a diversity of reasons that people experience homelessness, whether it's literally just not enough dollars for income, for housing, whether it's leaving an abusive relationship, whether your housing was sold, whether you came into homeless out of incarceration. It's all in the report, you can read it later. But there's a varied reasons, which means that we need varied solutions. We need to have the same pathways into homelessness, have pathways out of homelessness that meet people where they're at, that approach them from a person-centered approach, that support them on their goals and their journeys so that they can thrive in our community and be a part of giving back. We are so blessed here at Siloam to have so many people with lived experience on our team, and the gift and graciousness that they can give to people currently experiencing homelessness of, I have been where you are, and it is possible for you to be where I am, housed, thriving, and giving back. But it is only possible when those people have access to the right supports, healing, and recovery tools to make that journey. And so today, when we think about the amount of people experiencing homelessness in Winnipeg being close to 4,500, we need to make sure that we're also thinking about the solutions, A, meeting that number, and B, being as diverse as the people that we counted themselves. We need solutions that make sure that people are not leaving incarceration straight into homelessness. We need solutions that mean that no kid ages out of care and into homelessness. We need solutions that make sure that people have an ability to see their strengths, to see their ability for survival on the street, their ability to push against systems and access what they need as a way that they can become housed and thriving and giving back in our community. And we know at Siloam and across the sector that that means that as a sector, we need to work together. And so we thank Social Planning Council of Winnipeg, we thank End Homelessness Winnipeg, we thank our staff team, some of whom are in the room, provided leadership with the census as well, and all of the partners for saying, not only do these people matter, but us working together matters. And we know that we can do better. And so as we take this information in today, and I love what Jason said, may we have a goal of having not only a count that is less next time, but may we have a goal of being able to list the diversity of solutions that meets people where they're at, loves them just as they are, and shows them that not only are they housable, but that they have gifts and strengths to give to that community in which they deserve housing in. And so I hope that next time we're talking more about those things and that we can push to see those things come to reality. And I thank you all for being here and continuing to care. At Siloam, we say that's because we're loving our neighbors, and that is a call that we feel deeply. And so let us be neighbors. Thank you.
Yes, I believe. Is he here?
Is Jacob here? Maybe we'll come back to him.
Maybe. A little bit of housekeeping, I did forget.
Okay.
Last bit of housekeeping, Social Planning Council is actually a depot for home tests. So we brought some with us today. We're all assuming we're all well and we're all vaccinated, and that's why we came to public today. So we're not sending any scare message out there, but we believe in data, right? If we have the data, we have the information. So we have a whole box of them. So if you feel like taking some home, so whenever you wake up in the morning and you've got the sniffles and you kind of go, should I go out? You can have a test. So there we are. Elijah, I guess we'll turn it over to you now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Elijah Oseboa, the manager for evaluation and shared measurement at End Homelessness Winnipeg. Jason thanked the stakeholders or partners for the 2022 street census, but I would like to do an extended version of that. It's taken us almost a year to plan and implement this project. And first of all, I would like to thank my colleagues at End Homelessness Winnipeg, especially Jason Wishford, our CEO, for his incredible support. I would also want to thank Betty Adele. I think she deserves a special mention. She oversaw the planning and implementation of the street census when it started, and I took over in March this year. I remember right before we did the street counts, I had a family emergency and I had to take some time off, but she kept it for me while I was away. So I'm very grateful for her support. Apart from Betty and Jason, other colleagues of mine have also contributed immensely to this project, and I'll be eternally grateful for their support. They say teamwork makes the dream work. And Homelessness Winnipeg didn't complete this project alone. Social Planning Council of Winnipeg, they led the first street census in 2015 and the second one in 2018. So we collaborated with them to coordinate the projects, and they also wrote the report for us. They was funded, the lead consultant, Kate, the ED for Social Planning Council of Winnipeg, and the other staff of Social Planning Council of Winnipeg. We can't thank you enough for your immeasurable contributions to this project. In addition, we also partnered with many individuals and over 20 local agencies. And we are also very grateful for that. I would like to mention their names just to show how much we appreciate their support and their contributions. The first on my list here is Manitoba Native Federation, the City of Winnipeg, Winnipeg Regional Health Authority, St. Boniface Street Lanes, Shiweni Abinuji, First Nations family advocate, Siloam Mission, and Siloam Mission has been a great ally to end homelessness with Winnipeg. So thank you so much. You and your staff have been amazing. You, Sharon, and the rest of your staff have been really amazing, and they've helped me even plan this event. So thank you so much. I continue with the list of stakeholders who participated in this project. Mamawi, Main Street Projects, West Central Women's Resource Center, Ganiche, forgive me if I mangled the name, Mount Carmel Clinic, The Link, Nidinawimak, Wabon, Spence Neighborhood Association, United Way Winnipeg, Magnus Elias Recreation Center, and Indigenous Elder Charlotte. Thank you so much. She sat on the steering committee. Thank you so much. And we also work with lived and live. We also work, those with lived and living experience of homelessness. The next organization on my list is Downtown Community Safety Partnership. I also have North End Women's Resource Center. And I would like to also express my gratitude to Manitoba Blue Cross. Manitoba Blue Cross gave us staff who helped during the street count. They also donated some items to the project. And Julie PR and marketing, they helped me plan this event. I would also like to thank the 200 volunteers who also went out in May to conduct the service, which helped us to gather the data that we need on our relatives who are experiencing homelessness. Last but not the least, I would like to thank every guest who has come here today to attend this event, and to our online audience of Zoom. Thank you so much for also making time to attend this event. If I didn't mention your name, despite you contributing to this project, it doesn't mean we don't value your support. I hope you understand that I have a limited amount of time, so I won't be able to mention everybody's name. Thank you so much. I'll now turn over to Josh Brandon.
Thanks so much, Elijah, and thanks everybody for coming today. It has been a long journey to get this report out, and there's a lot of hands that have been part of this. Thanks, Tessa, for hosting us here at Siloam, and thank you to people Treaty 1 territory for welcoming us to this land as well. So as Kate mentioned, the street census has an interesting methodology. It isn't really a census in the sense that we're able to reach every single person experiencing homelessness. We were able to talk to obtain data about over 1,200 people experiencing homelessness this time. And that number alone should be shocking for us. The fact that in a country as wealthy as Canada and in a city as prosperous as Winnipeg, there are 1,200 of our neighbors and relatives who are without shelter should be shocking to us. But that alone is just a small portion of the people we know who are suffering from homelessness here in Winnipeg. And there's a lot of reasons why we don't reach out to everybody. One is, people are in situations of hidden homelessness. For instance, if people are staying with relatives or with friends and family in a temporary situation, maybe what's called couch surfing, colloquially, is actually a form of hidden homelessness, and our methodology doesn't always reach those people as well. We know that people are dispersed throughout the community, and the geographic spread of homelessness in Winnipeg is extensive and growing, and has been over the last few years during the pandemic. So there's a number of reasons like that. And as well, not everybody wants to have their stories told. So, and not everybody wants to be interviewed. There's a lot of good reasons that people have for not providing us access to their information. And so we're very grateful and thankful for the people who did participate in the street census this time. So our methodology really did combine a number of sources. And so, okay. Yeah, so where people stayed, we did talk to people who were. Do you need help? No, I think I'm got it. I just pressed the wrong button. There we go. Yeah, so we did talk to people who were staying outdoors, people who were unsheltered. We know there's a growing number of encampments along our riverbanks, in bus shelters, various locations throughout the city. We had teams of volunteers going out throughout the streets, particularly in the downtown inner city areas, reaching out to people, doing interviews throughout the day of May 25th. We also had contact with people in locations like at shelters, in locations where people are likely to be accessing services, food banks, places like that, where we were contacting people as well. So as well as doing the interviews with people, we had a 21 questionnaire that people answered. We also were able to obtain administrative data from a number of sources, including some of the main shelters, as well as family violence, youth shelters. As well, we had information with data from Winnipeg Regional Health Authority. They give us data because unfortunately, there are people who are in our hospitals, and Winnipeg Health doesn't know where they're going to be released to. They're of no fixed address, or they may be going to a shelter when they get out of the hospital. So there's people in our hospital system as well. We know as well there's similarly large number of people in our justice system from past Winnipeg street censuses that were being released from Manitoba Corrections into homelessness. We were not able to get data from Manitoba Corrections this time around, and we'll hope to correct that in future census. But we know that's also a source of homelessness. So just from this chart, we know then that there's a lot of reasons why people are not included, but we try to be as comprehensive as possible. The age and gender mix of people experiencing homelessness, we know that there's a large number of young people experiencing homelessness. The people under 30 represented over a quarter of the people experiencing homelessness. We know that there are children experiencing homelessness as well. Our methods do not allow us to interview people experiencing homelessness who are under the age of 16, but we do have some data about people experiencing homelessness as part of family shelters, for example, in those sorts of situations. So there is some representation. On the other end, we also know that there's a large number of our elders who are experiencing homelessness. The oldest person that we interviewed was in their 80s. And so that's something that we really need to be thoughtful about, is how are we treating our elders within this. To me, it's shocking again that we're allowing people of all ages to continue experiencing homelessness. Once again, our data, we collected more data about men than about women. We know that that's not entirely the full picture. Women are more likely to be experiencing hidden homelessness. And there's good reasons why we won't have data. We have a lot of data from the shelters, and many of our shelters, it's not an environment where women who are homelessness maybe choose other options. Unfortunately, they're not always good options. They're never good options when they're homeless, right? We also did have about 10% of the population that we interviewed were LGBTQ as well. And so we don't include that in the age pyramid just because the numbers there weren't high enough to protect their identities if we included in the age pyramid. Then we also know that, as everybody has mentioned already, we have a disproportionate number of people who are Indigenous in homelessness. And that's been a consistent story here in Winnipeg for many years. And the reasons for it are related intergenerationally to histories of colonialism, of poverty, of discrimination, and of racism. And that is, if we are to actually take steps towards reconciliation, that has to be one of the prime goals that we have, ending Indigenous homelessness, ending homelessness here in Winnipeg. Because if we're allowing such a large disproportionate number of Indigenous people to continue to suffer homelessness, then that impedes all progress, I think, on truly becoming partners in this shared land. Sources of income. Kate mentioned some of this earlier, that we know that people who are homeless, the majority, about 55%, are receiving income from social assistance. And that alone should show that our social assistance levels are not high enough to keep people properly housed and keep people well and safe. And so we desperately need those levels to come up to a level where people can afford to be housed and to have access to adequate shelter. And the flip side of those numbers is that a large number, of almost half, are not receiving EIA. And so that again reminds us, not only do EIA levels need to be higher, but we need to reduce the barriers for people who are experiencing homelessness to get onto EIA. I spoke to one woman while we were doing the street census who talked to me about all the hoops that she's having to jump through. And I think those of you who partnered as volunteers, I know a lot of you, it's a common experience. People are waiting to get onto EIA for months at a time. They're having to get ID, they're having to prove their residence, and all sorts of barriers that people have to getting into the system. We need to streamline those to get people the funding they need as quickly as possible so that they can get properly housed. And so, as well as missing out on those on EIA, we also know that a lot of people, just about everybody, I think everybody who's experiencing homelessness, should be eligible for basic tax benefits like GST credits and things like that, climate action incentive credits. And most people are not getting those. And so we need to do a much better job to make those make those payments automatic and available for everyone. As poor as our social safety net is, we at least need to give the advantage of how much of it does exist to everybody who's experiencing homelessness. One other thing I wanted to point out about the income thing here is it does dispel some of the notions that people have about homelessness. People who are homeless are hardworking. So many people have part-time employment, some even have full-time employment, and if they don't have employment, they're probably have a number of casual and informal income streams that they're participating in, whether that's bottle collecting, whether it's illicit activities as well. Those are hard work as well. And yeah, so I think we need to remember the diversity of income sources that people rely on while they are experiencing homelessness. Education, you know, it's not surprising that the levels of education, if we have less than a high school education, we're much more likely to experience homelessness. And it does remind us we need to make education as accessible as possible. There was just recently a report published about the importance of adult education and how that can be a pathway for people to get out of poverty and certainly out of homelessness as well. And so we need to support that as well. CFS care, I think a number of the people have already mentioned, is a main pathway into homelessness. We know that 50% of people experiencing homelessness have had time in CFS. We know that the most common age that people experience first homelessness is at age 18, and a large number of other people experience between ages of 12 and 20. And so we know that's a route into homelessness for so many people. And if we can improve that transitioning process for people and reduce the number of people who are having to go into CFS in the first place, both of those will make a long-term impact on homelessness, because we know that when people enter homelessness at age 18, they're more likely to experience homelessness later in life as well. And we need to break that cycle early on. And so this chart just shows, you know, that big grouping that I talked about of people experiencing homelessness. Homelessness, when we're asking people about the cause of homelessness, really it's lack of money and lack of affordable housing are the answers that most people talk about when we ask them about homelessness and what would help them to get out of homelessness, what their dreams are. This time, for the first time, we did ask people, you know, what does good housing situation look like for you? And people talked, they had pretty much similar aspirations that I have, and most of my neighbors have, about having a good quality home, somewhere they can afford, talking about somewhere they can spend time with their families. And to me, that is a reflection that we share a lot of these aspirations together, and we need to work together to make sure that we're all able to afford our dreams of having good quality housing that's affordable, safe, and connects us with our communities. Just wanted to say before I thank everyone, a little bit more about some of the recommendations. There is a sheet of recommendations that's appended into your report, if you have access to that. Because we were working on these back and forth with our community partners, they weren't included in the printed version of the report, but there is an annex there of recommendations that we've included, and I encourage you all to look through those. But they really fall under two major categories. One is we need systems change here in Manitoba. And that is, we can't rely on a charity model to get us out of homelessness. We need to think about a bigger picture of what are the structural barriers to getting people out of homelessness and to ensuring that we all achieve our dreams of having good quality housing. And so that means thinking about, as Jason was mentioning, what is the transition for people coming from First Nations communities into Winnipeg? And how are the supports divided there? What kinds of supports do people have when people get here? And Eagle Urban does a great job. I worked with Jason on a project several years ago, looking at the supports that were available. But honestly, we need to fund those supports much better. And we need to have much greater supports. And at the same time, we need to think about in people's home communities, what supports are they given to make sure that they're ready to make that transition that most people do at some point in their lives live in a city, whether you grow up in a First Nations community or you live in another rural community in Canada. We have a web of connections here in this country, and people do make those transitions and movements throughout their lives. And we need to make sure that people have the supports both in their home communities and in Winnipeg. We also need to think about child and family services. The supports need to be in place both to provide families the resources they need so that they're not in crisis, or if they are in crisis, they have the ability to access the resources they need to keep their families whole, because we know that when people enter the CFS system, they're so much more likely to experience homelessness later in life. And we also need to make sure that when people are in the CFS system, that they have the supports they need to get education, good quality housing, and employment when they exit through from CFS. We need more supports for a housing first type approach, where there's no wrong door for accessing services. We can't have a situation where people, at our office, I feel, we're not a direct service agency, but so often people come into our door, they know that we're a community organization, and they say, oh, I'd like to access services. And there isn't, we do our best to help them, direct them, because we're connected with a number of your organizations to be able to provide those resources. But there needs to be a system in place that whatever door people come to asking for services, they are put in connection with the services they need. And so that's a really key part of it as well, I think. We need better benefit levels. Just recently, the province of Manitoba increased support for people experiencing rent assist from 75% of median market rent to 77% of median market rent. And while any improvement is welcome, the small magnitude of that increase and the large gap between 77% and 100% reminds us there's so much more to do. There's very little housing that's available at 77 or 75% of median market rent. In fact, there's very little that's housing that's available at 100% of median market rent. The vacancy rates are much lower. the lower on the housing, on the rent scale you go. And so we need to raise rent assist levels to at least 100% of median market rent. And we need to build much more affordable housing, because we need to have housing that is rent geared to income, that has the supports that people need to make sure that they're able to sustain their housing, whether that's childcare, if it's mental health supports, addiction supports, all of those supports come together to make sure that people are continue to be housed. And so we need to provide much more of that kind of housing. And Homelessness Winnipeg did a report a couple of years ago saying that there was at least 470 spaces, new spaces that were needed immediately. And instead, we've gone in the opposite direction, and we've lost 881 spaces of the type of housing that gets people out of homelessness. There's been very little housing that's been created through the National Housing Strategy over the last 3 years that's affordable housing, that's rent geared to income housing here in Winnipeg. And so we need to really boost up support for creating new affordable housing. You can read more of the recommendations and more of the data in the charts, but I'll leave that there as highlights. I do want to conclude by thanking everybody for participating. Elijah did a good job thanking all the 24 organizations and hundreds of volunteers. A couple of people I wanted to specifically mention. We have a couple of students, Joanne San Juan and Reg Crone Brothers, who worked really hard with me on inputting the data. Ashley Willowland as well assisted with the data analysis as well. And so I want to thank them. I also want to recognize that this report does build on past street censuses and reports that have been done over a number of years. And I see Christina Mays-Nino in the audience today, and really want to thank her, because you know, the model that we have here in Winnipeg is really a stellar model. It's an exemplar across Canada of combining different data sources and doing more than just a point-in-time count. Because at the end of the day, everybody whose story is represented here has families, has stories, and we do our best to try to reflect that aspect of it. It's not just a point-in-time count. And so the model that we built here in Winnipeg, and thanks to Christina in particular for her past leadership on that project, is really makes this report unique. And so thanks everybody, thanks to End Homelessness Winnipeg as well for their support. And we're open for questions now. Yeah, hi.
My first meeting I did at the end of July. At the beginning of August, after working with Tom and Joelle, they had given the application for End Homelessness Winnipeg, because there's also a grant. Other than rent assist, there's a grant for the End Homelessness Winnipeg.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay. Now, how does that work?
The top-up grant to the Canada Housing Benefit?
Yeah, I guess that's what it's called, because I haven't heard anything back for 3 months, and I don't know what's happening with it, whether it's been approved or how it works or anything like that, and how somebody else would get, other than apply for it, how.
You know, I think that I don't connect people directly with the services. I think there's some other organizations here.
I can take your name. I know a staff who works on that program, so I'll take your name and your details.
Great.
After this event, I'll follow up for you and make sure that you get a benefit. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that question. Let's do community questions first and then we'll do media afterwards, if that's all right. Anybody else in the community? Yeah.
I think I think the media questions are happening afterwards. Was that it? It's like there's lunch and then there's media. Is that how it's happening?
Yeah, we can do media questions if you have some short questions, but if you wanted to do one-on-one interviews, we'll be available afterwards as well. Oh, okay. Is that how it's gonna work?
Yeah, right after this,
All right.
so media can ask their questions individually to all the.
Sure.
And that's probably easier, and we don't have to take everybody else's time and they can enjoy lunch.
All right. Well, oh, there's a question at the back. Hi.
The report talks about doing the free samples in a pandemic and some of the challenges related to that. One of the things that in the pandemic also is that people are in different places than they were, right? They were accessing resources and resources aren't available in the same places that they were in 2018 and 2050. Can you tell us more about sort of how you reach the folks that are saying, you know, we can folks in different bus shelters?
That's an excellent question, and the pandemic has affected everybody in Canada and everybody around the world, and no group is more affected by the pandemic, I think, than people experiencing homelessness. You know, it has affected, you know, how comfortable people are staying at shelters. It affects, you know, where people can congregate during the day. So some of these aspects affected how easily we were able to reach people. So a good example of that is a number of the food banks in past street censuses. We would go to the food bank and we could go from table to table and sign people up and interview people that way. Whereas this time, many of the food service organizations provide meals, but they're to-go meals. And so people take their packaged lunch and go off to a park or a park bench or somewhere they're staying and have their lunch there. And so there isn't the congregation of people in the same places. There are many more locations throughout the city that people are staying. And so all that did create challenges for us as an organization conducting the street census. We did have teams go out. There is an outreach team that's coordinated through End Homelessness Winnipeg that has been doing outreach throughout the pandemic to check in on people in encampments. So we had some data about where those encampments would be, and we had teams that were contacting some of those people, but we certainly did miss a large number of people in those areas as well, especially outside the inner city. We just did not have as much capacity to reach them.
Josh did want to mention the number of volunteers was also affected by the pandemic.
That's right. You know, we reached out to volunteers who participated in 2018 and previous censuses who did not necessarily feel comfortable volunteering this time because of the ongoing pandemic or maybe their own health concerns.
Just to add to what Josh said. So we also, as you mentioned, we work with outreach teams, and the outreach teams on a daily basis, they look out for where our brothers and sisters who are experiencing homelessness are, and they reach out to them and give them the support that they need. So working with them also really helps because they work with them on a daily basis and they know where those who are unsheltered stay. So that also really helps.
Okay. Yes.
So I guess first off, I just want to thank everyone that was involved. It's fantastic stuff. So we have these wonderful recommendations. So my question is what's the next step? Where do these recommendations go? Is there a plan to follow up and advocate?
Well, I hope that all these recommendations are implemented as soon as possible, and we will be presenting the report and these recommendations to all 3 levels of government to make sure that they're aware. But I think it's incumbent on all of us to continue to advocate for implementing these recommendations and for the investments that are necessary to end homelessness. We never see major social change happen unless we have energy and community input into creating the creative solutions that are necessary. And then secondly, we need governments with political will to implement those. And so we have a role to give them the energy they need to make sure that these are put into place.
To add to what Josh also said, we have also set up a media team which will help disseminate these research findings. So hopefully the key research findings and the recommendations will get to all the 3 levels of government and those in the position of power who have the ability to effect the change we want to see in Winnipeg.
But next year is an election year. Oh, sorry, I was just shouting out. Next year is an election year of the provincial government, so that's the time to get active on it.
Oh, right. So this is what I said. We have set up a media team. They will help disseminate the research findings, and hopefully those in positions of power will hear and they will do something about this. They will implement the changes that we have recommended, and hopefully that will help meet the needs of our brothers and sisters who are experiencing homelessness in Winnipeg.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit more to where the information came on the law for social housing units? So I agree there's many different pathways to homelessness, and absolutely there will be varied solutions to homelessness, but if that pathway leads to any additional housing or supportive housing or permanent housing, where is this path going to? So can you speak a little bit more as to where the information and the laws of the housing unit?
Yeah, I can respond to that. So, End Homelessness Winnipeg introduced a 5-year plan. And in the 5-year plan, we had recommended that Winnipeg needed over 1,500 new housing units. So this will be in addition to the existing stock. And on a yearly basis, we track housing supply in Winnipeg. And this includes transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, social housing units. For the data on social housing units, we got that data from the province. So that is where the data is coming from. And as just mentioned, we have recommended in our 5-year plan that we needed 470 additional social housing units. However, from 2019 to 2021, we lost 881 social housing units. So to be able to close this gap, we'll probably have to triple the original number.
So will there be specific media strategy on defining the loss?
That is a very good question. So Jason and I think during the summer, we actually did a presentation at the city hall to the EPC, and that was one of the things which we talked about. And End Homelessness Winnipeg is also partnering with the principal investigator at Manitoba Research Alliance. We plan to conduct a conference on the need for the provincial government and the federal government to invest more in social housing. The good news is we got funded for the events, I think a few weeks ago. So we have started planning it, and hopefully even tomorrow we will start with our first meeting. And the conference will take place at the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. And we are looking at holding this or hosting this conference around April next year.
After that?
about the hidden homeless people with seniors getting older and a baby boomer and all that stuff. Do you consider the seniors that are in the hospital that are waiting for residential homes to get into the nursing home? Are those considered getting homeless? And is that something you guys will be addressing? Is the community getting older themselves? Is the
We did not obtain data about that group and that demographic. The way Winnipeg Regional Health Authority collects its data and gives us their data didn't capture those cases. But you're absolutely right that homelessness and hidden homelessness takes so many forms. And to solve those problems, we need to have a diversity of housing solutions, including affordable housing for seniors. Just last month, we learned about the possible sale of Lions Place seniors residence and the loss of more affordable housing for seniors. So there's so many ways that we're losing housing that is affordable. We need to be building up those resources much better. Yeah.
It's not directly related to housing, but we're also part of the Manitoba Health Coalition, and that's something that they are looking into, is the idea of a seniors advocate, because we need one in the province for definitely. So it's the work is related. Definitely they'll know about this report, they'll know about what we're talking about, they'll know that they're already on the idea that this is a serious issue that's going on right now in our hospitals.
And also, I would like to add that thanks for providing this feedback. As Josh mentioned during his presentation, our methodology doesn't capture hidden homelessness. It's one area that in the future, either we look at how best we can capture that data as part of the census, or perhaps if we get approved for funding, end homelessness with Winnipeg would partner with other stakeholders, and we can actually do research on hidden homelessness alone to be able to understand it better. And hopefully that will inform how we address that issue.
I just want to touch that I'm a working agency system navigator, and I'm often noticing that you guys are talking about the CFS part. But I think we really need to talk about the CLDS, because they don't qualify for the housing first, but they will not be doing anything. And all these people are homeless. Like, I'm trying to make them accountable, but they really don't do anything. So that's another piece that's missing.
Right. Thank you so much for that comment.
Yeah.
That's for learning disability.
The adult disability.
Adult disability.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, yeah, they have all these programs where they're supposed to be supported, but they really aren't. And I even work with having them accountability for their clients, but they really won't house them. And then they're not even in, they don't qualify for the housing first because they have, So yeah, that's just one piece I want to mention that I encounter daily with, so.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that experience.
Yeah.
What about some of the ways people, like Matt, take for instance, Manitoba Housing, treat their tenants? There be any change in that? A lot of them are, believe me, are treated very wrongfully. And that is not right.
Mhm. Well, one thing that we've learned is that people who are staying at shelters or people are staying outdoors often are coming out of housing situations that they find intolerable for various reasons. The housing that is available for people with very low incomes is invariably unaffordable, overcrowded, or in poor quality. And that includes sometimes, unfortunately, even Manitoba housing locations for people, if they don't feel safe, they don't feel welcome in their homes, there's few options for people. So we definitely need to address that as well. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for all the comments and questions. We'll stick around to talk with the media, but there's lunch over here for the people to help themselves do.
Okay, so we're gonna have the media notes from right now, those two groups. I believe it's Josh, and Elijah one.
Yeah, sure, I deal with.
And I'll take like
My word, not what